The first ever expanded college football playoff is here, and it's already packed with drama.
Alabama is out. SMU is in. Did the committee get it right? Or is this a new era of chaos in college football?
Today, we're diving into the whirlwind that is the first ever expanded college football playoff. From controversial selections to unprecedented matchups, this postseason is already shaping up to be historic.
Last year's CFP decision stirred controversy when an undefeated Florida State was left out. And this year, the drama continues as Alabama, a storied SEC powerhouse, finds itself on the outside looking in.
We'll break down why the committee made this decision, how the expanded format is reshaping the narrative, and what it means for programs like Boise State and SMU who are rewriting the playbook in this new era of college football.
Plus, we'll explore the massive financial implications, the evolving role of boosters, and the growing influence of media rights in shaping the sport.
Who's really calling the shots in college football?
And where does the sport go from here?
Let's get into it.
But before we do so, make sure you like this video, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so that you never miss a future episode.
And with that, we hope you enjoy the show.
Last year, it was undefeated Florida State that was left out of the playoffs, and this year it's powerhouse Alabama that is out. Why did the committee make this call, and what does it mean for the playoffs moving forward?
Like many people across the country, SMU losing to Clemson in the ACC Conference Championship opened a lot of questions about who would be that last team in it. Would it be SMU or would it be Alabama? But it wasn't just choosing which two teams from two different conferences, and as we know, the financial implications that there are immense, but it was also answering the questions of whether a conference championship game is needed and whether strength of schedule actually matters. So the CFP committee ultimately picked SMU over Alabama, and that immediately triggered a lot of angry Alabama and SEC fans, claiming a stronger schedule isn't going to help your case anymore to get into the playoff. We've talked about it on here before of this expanded playoff and not knowing what criteria it will have to make it into the playoff, as this is the first year with a 12-team playoff. Bama fans felt like they should be in over SMU due to the high-level matchups they faced. I think it's important to note that Alabama had 3 losses, and those 3 losses were from conference matchups, not the non-conference strength of schedule teams. Bama had lost to a 6-6 Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. This is hard to argue your way into a playoff spot when the top-ranked SMU in the ACC was playing for the conference title. I think that's also important to note because the Alabama AD, I believe, made kind of a statement on Twitter, and the Twitter community guidelines came up and corrected it by saying that Bama had lost 2 in-conference games to a 6-6 Vanderbilt OU. So it's kind of important to know that strength of schedule kind of caveat there. But no matter what, there will always be drama over a selection committee and their choices, because at the end of the day, it is human beings who have biases. It's a subjective process, and money always has a key role in it. But the way the playoff matchups have fallen, the first round has no in-conference matchups, providing viewers with new and exciting matchups that they haven't seen earlier in the year. And the Michigan AD and CFP executive director had said, "We didn't boost people because they were champions or knock people way down because they lost. It's how the game was played. Those were close, very tightly played competitions." This to me just shows that what the CFP is trying to do. I think the SEC bias and also Big Ten bias has been relevant and pretty prevalent in just past CFP decisions. But with the CFP decision over the weekend, I think they are really just trying to look for parity in games. They don't want blowout games because those aren't going to be exciting to watch, but instead they want the nail-biter games that get people to not only watch the game, but also switch to the channel instead of away when these games are thus played.
Well, I think it's an important conversation to have in the space of the schedule and the strength of the schedule. And part of that has to do with something we've talked about previously with the bracket and expanded format of what that would look like in this new era of college football playoffs. And there we naively assume that Boise State or whatever group of 5 team would be in would be the 12th seed. And us, along with so many others, were clearly wrong because Boise State is actually the 3rd seed, meaning they get a first round bye. So what precedent does this set for other non-Power 4 teams, as well as those Power 4 teams that are technically competing in the best conferences in the nation?
Yeah, I think first, my apologies to the Boise State team and those fans. Like,
I was
think
not
it's
familiar with your game.
Yeah. So Boise State having a first round bye is not something that I would have predicted earlier in the year. I think I even said it. I was like, no matter what, the group of 5 team is getting the 12th seed. Clearly, I was very wrong, but I am so excited to see them go up against a Power 4 opponent and hopefully put on a great game. I would love to see them make it to the semifinals and continue this great run of this year. And I think many programs that we've talked about on this podcast, the story and narrative is always how money talks and money is ruining the game. Boise State, a program a part of the Mountain West Conference and will be joining the Pac-12 in 2026, spends around $21.8 million on football expenses. To give that some context, Oregon reportedly spends $42.9 million, Georgia at $69.1 million, and Ohio State at $72.4 million on football expenses. Ohio State's coaching staff salary alone is $21.8 million, the entirety of Boise State's expenses. So for a team like Boise State to be able to recruit, retain, and dominate with the talent they have and with the money they have is incredible in just this new day and age of college athletics. And to me, it provides a new narrative that isn't one around money, but about building something to compete against the best of the best.
I don't think we can talk about money in this new era of college sports, specifically college football, college basketball, without talking about media rights. And I think that starts here with the new format and the new era of college football playoffs, specifically with the money coming from ESPN and the CFP. What is that looking like?
So ESPN has rights to the CFP games, but per the agreement, TNT will sublicense ESPN's rights to broadcast 2 first-round playoff games for each of the next 5 seasons. So it was decided that TNT will air the SMU Penn State and Clemson at Texas games. While the licensee fee was not released, ESPN has said to value each of those first-round games to be around $25 million per game. And like you said, those media rights agreements, let's not forget about the stake the conferences have in this. The Big Ten leads the playoff with 4 teams, SEC with 3, ACC with 2, Big 12 with 1, and Mountain West with 1, and 1 independent of Notre Dame. Breaking that down, the guaranteed conference buyouts look like this. Big 10, $20 million, SEC, $16 million, ACC, $12 million, Big 12, $8 million, Mountain West, $8 million. So the CFP picking SMU over Bama was a minimum of a $4 million decision.
I mean, and with that decision, I think we should look at SMU and the story they had because it's pretty interesting how they've gotten so far this season.
Yeah, so along the same lines of conference realignment, with SMU joining the ACC, they do not have a share of the ACC media rights for 9 years, which is around $24 million per year. So their boosters then raised over $200 million to make up for this loss to get into the new conference. Now SMU makes the CFP and the conference championship game in their first season in the conference. And as we know, media rights makes up a big portion of the revenue for schools and how they are able to stay, one, competitive just against other institutions in their conference, also in terms of status for recruitment. And we've talked a lot about the impact of boosters with the Michigan PSA Bryce Underwood, but the booster support is one that truly changes the game. The previous episode, we kind of touched on it, but I really do wonder what could have happened if boosters had some say in the realignment process, or if they did and what that looked like. Because just looking at the conference championships this past weekend, Oregon won the Big Ten, previous Pac-12 team. ASU won the Big 12, previous Pac-12 team. And Boise State won the Mountain West, future Pac-12 team. So noting that those three teams will also all get first-round byes in the playoff, the Pac-12 truly had competitive teams. And it, again, us both being student athletes of the Pac-12, it is so sad to see that gone. So for me, I'm just like really interested to see if boosters had a say, because they did in SMU joining the ACC. The boosters rallied and they helped that transition into the ACC for SMU. So if boosters knew that the Pac-12 was going to implode the way it would these boosters be able to raise the money in terms of that media rights share the Pac-12 was missing in comparison to Big 12, SEC, what they were getting from their media rights? If boosters knew they could be the ones to stop this conference realignment happening, if they would have, and how much money they could have raised to keep it together and keep the original Pac-12 teams at their respective conference.
Just to be clear, the ACC has two teams in the CFP, meaning they get $12 million as a conference, one of those teams being SMU. But SMU doesn't get any media rights money from the ACC. So does this mean that the conference is literally taking this money with them as well?
Oh, yeah. Like, I think the ACC really lucked out with SMU. Very much so lucked out.
That is insane. That's insane that from literally their conference champs going through, or sorry, not conference champs, they lost in the championship. Anyways, their season, best team in the season so far in the conference, they're not getting any money.
And I think the way the ACC championship unfolded, that game, the ACC could not have asked for anything more. If SMU beat Clemson, no shot Clemson would have made it into the CFP. But because Clemson won, they got that automatic bid in. Clearly, they didn't get a first-round bye like we had expected, but they got an automatic bid. And no, there's that discourse of, if you take Alabama, conference championships shouldn't be a thing because SMU just played in it and is getting punished when they were that top seed. So might as well not play in it, because Indiana, they have one loss to Ohio State. They were not in the Big Ten championships. Ohio State was not in the Big Ten championships. But it was no question that both those teams would be in the CFP. So there is a Big Ten SEC bias. We all know that. And I think the Big Ten, and there were like memes all over Twitter. Like there's one of Indiana just like mouth shut, just being like, I'm going to let them figure this one out, because they know like we have a loss. Like the argument that Indiana does not have a strong schedule is always there. They're like, that's the easiest schedule in the Big Ten, whatever. And for the ACC to now have these teams in, and the way it played out is great for them. I think it's also important to note that with how the bracket played out, Oregon being the first seed got screwed. I think the easiest path to the national championship is Penn State, 5th seed. Oregon being the first seed, you would think they get the easiest pass because they earned it. They were 13-0 in the regular season. And for them to possibly have an Ohio State rematch at the Rose Bowl quarterfinals, the semifinals then going up against potential Texas, and then if they beat Texas, going to the national championship and going against Georgia, that is by far the hardest schedule to get to the Natty. And there's always two kind of arguments there. It's like, well, if they're the number one team, this shouldn't be an issue. The other side is they're the number one team. You should be rewarded and have the easiest path to the national championship. I also think it's funny how the only kind of possible rematch that we're most likely going to see is Ohio State, Oregon at the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day. That is going to be electric if that matchup happens again. And I'm excited to see a Big Ten quarterfinal matchup in the Rose Bowl.
I think this is part of the game, right? It's why being an in-season team versus a playoff team, a tournament schedule team, is just completely different. And it's the beauty of sports. the best team isn't always going to win in any tournament format. And it's the first time we're really seeing it here in college football. That's just how it goes. That's how it goes across any type of sport. There are teams that are really good in season, but once you feel the pressure of the postseason, of the playoffs, of a tournament, it's any team can win. And you go through. This time, it's time for college football to learn how to dance, right? They're dancing. That's part of the game. It's not always that the best team goes through. And actually, it's usually not even that the best team wins. So it'll be exciting to see. But I do want to take a pause and go back to something you were mentioning there, which is the donors and the role that could have been played for the Pac-12. I think specifically for SMU, what conference was SMU in before this one? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Point being, yeah, look it up. But point being, what I'm trying to say is they don't have any Power 5 or now Power 4 experience besides the ACC.
They were a part of the American Conference.
Exactly. So they've never been part of a big conference. They've never been part of Power 5, never been part of Power 4. They sneak into the ACC, and then they nearly win the whole thing. They dominated the entire season in conference, and they get to the championship and even make it to college football playoffs. SMU, how is that possible? They're not getting any media rights money. Where is this coming from? Well, if you're going to talk about a university that has donor support, that has money going into the university, it's SMU. So I think that's interesting as well. You look at this private conservative university, has so much money, students coming from so much family money going there as well. You want to see them win. And I think it's a reflection of that. And we may start seeing new, smaller schools that are private with a football team start sneaking in if they can continue to get this donor support. Because it's not just any school that can raise $200 million to have a replacement for the lack of media rights deals for 9 years. Not any school can do that. Really just can't. And if they do, it's usually with a historic football team or a legacy or something like that, which to my knowledge, SMU doesn't really have at the level of SEC teams.
They do, but then they got in trouble early in the late 90s and they got, or like mid 90s, and they got like a death penalty from the NCAA. So they had like a huge scandal and they weren't allowed to either like recruit or play or something. So it like destroyed momentum, all this stuff. And shout out the Calgorithm here, but they compared SMU to USC. And they said SMU is just USC with a cowboy hat. And I think that is a perfect example, actually. It is a powerhouse athletic department, if I'm being honest, who has a lot of money and can compete at the top of its game. And I think now they're getting a lot of eyes because they are competing at the highest level.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't know that history from SMU, but point being, in my literal lifetime, they haven't been at that level, right? I don't remember them being at that level. Obviously, it's expanded now. But in my lifetime, I've never seen that. So 90s, all right, they were good back then. That's almost 30 years ago. Like mid 90s is almost literally 30 years ago at this point. So that's the point I'm trying to make. I think there is a comeback there for new opportunities in this donor era. And it clearly is USC with a cowboy hat, without a doubt. But it'll be exciting to see how they compete, how they do, and see what other schools across the nation that have these resources can do moving forward. I think that'll be extremely interesting. I'm not sure if you can even compare this to any other school we've seen across the nation thus far.
I know. I'm trying to think, and I can't really think of one. Like, I think SMU just came out of the gates and really shocked, I would say, the ACC in terms of just the dominance there was. And I think, not saying it was a sleeper team, but I think the narrative, at least until mid-season of the football season, was just, it's going to be Clemson, it's going to be Miami. And not to put our little sadness onto Miami, but that Cal-Miami game, and again, not saying that Miami got bailed out of that targeting call, but for Miami to not make the ACC championship game and SMU securing that first spot, because they were confirmed over Clemson. And for SMU to be the first one confirmed in that championship game is pretty amazing. Oregon the same. And it was just really cool to see new conference members really stepping it up and absolutely dominating in a new conference, new environment against new opponents.
Well, I think part of the excitement here with just the new era of college football playoffs and everything we're talking about is the fact that the first round of the CFP is going to be hosted on campuses. That is extremely exciting. It's extremely new. I have no idea what's going to happen. We've talked about it previously, and something I'm worried about is how the money is going to be distributed. How are ticketing systems going to work? Who does keep the money? Is it fair? Is it unfair? I know there's so much talk around this right now, plenty of discourse. So what's going on there?
So it looks like most tickets are going to season ticket holders of the university first, and then they're either going to resell tickets or general public tickets to other marketplace partners. I was on Twitter earlier today and I saw a Penn State student, he's a senior, he had tweeted saying that like basically zero Penn State students, let alone like these seniors, got a ticket to go to Penn State for a whiteout game against SMU in the first ever expanded playoff. And I think that will lose a lot of momentum and a lot of like home advantage. And just hearing that was really interesting, and then kind of seeing how these tickets are being distributed. So Ohio State says tickets for its first round CFP game will start at $100. There will be 3,500 seats allotted for Tennessee fans. Season ticket holders may request their normal home game ticket and parking locations. Season ticket holders interested in purchasing additional tickets for the CFP first round can do so via a pre-sale beginning on Wednesday morning earlier this week. Tickets will go on sale to non-season ticket holders on Thursday morning. Students can request tickets via a random drawing in their online ticket accounts. Texas season ticket holders can request their regular season seat and parking locations for the Longhorns' first round college matchup at 4 p.m. No general public tickets will be available for purchase. Fans interested in purchasing tickets should go to Texas's official marketplace, SeatGeek. Longhorn Foundation donors at the traditional level or higher, $1,500 or up, may also request tickets for other CFP games that the Longhorns may qualify for this postseason. And it was also reported previously by The Atlantic that Penn State gave season ticket holders until November 22nd to request their regular seats for the Nittany Lions CFP opener. And just looking at the Notre Dame Indiana tickets, they're available on StubHub. And as of right now, tickets are starting at $910 a piece, but go all the way up to $3,500 a seat. So clearly, it's not a regular game in terms of how these tickets are being distributed, but it's also rewarding the season ticket holders, which I think is really interesting going forward, because a lot of these season ticket holders, there's now a caveat to not like donate to the collective, but part of, I forget who did it. Maybe it was Tulane. They said if you are part of the foundation or whatever, you get these special perks. And the foundation was connected to like have some of it was donated to the collective. So they're kind of doing two initiatives at the same time. And the fact that we are single-handedly seeing season ticket holders and donors and people who are very loyal to the university get first pick and probably like the only reasonable priced CFP playoff tickets is going to be interesting going forward of, do I donate a certain amount to the collective or the fundraising team, whatever, just so I get a chance at being able to go to a CFP first round game in the future. Like, I think that will be something that comes into play if this works out and if the CFP stays governing this.
High risk, high rewards. To the winner goes the spoils. It's the era of money in college football, in college sports. And we're seeing this clearly right now with the playoffs, with the season ticket holders, everything involved, the collectives, etc. There's so much talk, so much money. And we're seeing the rewards here with these tickets for the playoff games. So now I'm really curious. Who's really calling the shots? Because, I mean, there could be commissioners, there could be the NCAA, but then there's the donors. Then there's the ultra fans that are just wanting to win, spending this money. SMU spending $200 million or gaining $200 million, raising $200 million. These ticket holders, like you just mentioned. So realistically, who's calling the shots in the CFP?
Times like these, with teams feeling they either got snubbed from playoff spots or controversial picks or even valid picks to make the playoffs, times like these expose the cracks of the system. And I think there are a lot more questions than answers. It's like you said, who is calling the shots in college football? Is it the SEC commissioner? Is it the Big Ten commissioner? Is it Charlie Baker? Is it the selection committee of the CFP? Or is it ESPN? And from there, what is the solution? I think a restructuring is needed, but how does that look is the problem of it. If it's one singular person, do you look to someone like Nick Saban to oversee it, who knows the pre-NIL era and post-NIL era, and now being like a talent on ESPN with College Game Day, and he now is on the very much so entertainment side of things? Because as we kick off the expanded playoff, there's clearly no kind of clarity in what is happening in the sport. ADs are going at it on Twitter. College football coaches are advocating for their college conference peers to make it into the playoff on national broadcast. The Clemson coach, when he won the ACC championship, went on the mic and said SMU deserves a playoff spot. This ACC is running social media posts as to why their teams deserve a spot. The direction of just where this is going is very, very unclear. And realistically, I think that looks like high-level college football teams removing themselves from the NCAA so they have their own governing entity. I don't know who runs that, but I think it's times like these when things change, like an expanded playoff, that it is very uncertain of who is actually the governing body of one of the biggest moneymakers in sports.
Yeah, it is difficult, especially like bringing up someone like Charlie Baker. No, like straight up, no. The NCAA makes nothing from the bowl games. Nothing. They're not involved in the bowl games, and I doubt they're involved in the CFP process because they're connected to the bowl games. So there's nothing to say there for the NCAA. And realistically, if you want one single entity to overlook it, it would be the NCAA. Odds of that happening, zero, even negative if you could put it there. Like, there's no way these bowl games are going to give up their rights, give up their power to the NCAA. That's a huge mistake that the NCAA as an organization made plenty of years ago in giving up that power. Humongous mistake. Probably the biggest mistake the NCAA has ever made is giving up the rights to these playoff games, to these bowl games, all these things. Humongous mistake, to the point that we've actually been there. We've been at these meetings and these dinners with someone like the Rose Bowl committee. Some people there that are really, really tied with the conferences. And there is, that power play, not necessarily nepotism per se, but there's that connection. There's that, you know what? I know you. I'll help you out. I'll bring you into my bowl game, this and that. That's how it works. Realistically, that's how it works. But if there's not one group overseeing that, everybody's going to play their own game. Everybody's going to make the decisions that favor them the most. And that just creates a mess. It creates a mess for the integrity of the sport, for the integrity of competition. And eventually, we're going to get to a point where some team is just left behind. And it's so bad that it'll just destroy the beauty of sports, which is competition and just, the reason we love sports, the reason we love the excitement and entertainment of it. So I don't know what's going on there, but that's personally the biggest issue I see moving forward.
So with the CFP and just the committee of choosing these 12 teams, and it's them sitting in a room and it's like, I saw that video, I don't know if you saw it, of all of them just sitting in leather chairs, just watching like the 4 screens and everything going on. So what are your thoughts of, let's say, a 64 team playoff?
That's just way too difficult because of the physicality of the sport. So a sport like soccer, a sport like basketball, where you do see these dances, this tournament, these playoffs happen, I think it's much easier on the body. Like for football, you don't play more than a game per week, ever, ever. For basketball, I think the pros play, I don't know how many times a week, but it's definitely more than 3. It's 3 to 4, sometimes even 5. Like you can do that. In soccer, you can do twice a week. Football, that would just really destroy the season. So it would be either a shorter season or a humongous season, including playoffs, which may be good for media rights situations, but at the same time, how long of a season is healthy on the body? So I'm not sure. I mean, what would be the best for these teams? I'm not sure if 64 is the best. I don't know if 12 is the best. Maybe a happy medium, finding some other number in between. Maybe not over. I mean, what would the next number be? 24 maybe? I don't know if that's the best case scenario to expand to 24. Maybe it is. Maybe that's what would keep things right. But the thing is, the issue is, the more you expand it, the same issue is going to come up. We deserve to be in. There's always going to be a team that deserves and wants to be in. I think something that really worked for college soccer this year is that you cannot make the playoffs if you are below 500 in your record. So, for example, we'll look at Cal men's soccer. Obviously, I played for them. They made it all the way to semis in the ACC tournament. They had a ridiculous record at the back end of the season, which was beating teams like Duke, UNC, even number 1 Pitt and Stanford, all away games. All of them. They were all away games. They were ranked 26th in the nation with their RPI, and they still didn't go through because they fell 1 game short of 500. I think that's a good way to measure it because, I mean, well, actually, I'm not sure if that's a good way to measure it because the conference strength there, the strength of schedule is, you can't compare it to some of these other teams that went through, which is part of the issue. But it's a good rule of thumb, like this was stated before. That's it. And that's how it works. I think college football needs something like that. Maybe if you have 3 losses, you can't go through. The issue would then be, what if all 12 teams have 3 losses? That's probably not going to happen. But it should be something like that. Something that it's like relatively even. And if the strength of schedule isn't going to matter, we'll have Alabama play some easy non-conference games. Oh, well
it's just, I think the Alabama situation is just funny because like their 3 losses came from an SEC. It's like in like conference games. So that's why like their AD saying that, everyone's just like, that's not a valid argument.
Also, I think the interesting thing is going to be, all right, maybe schedule strength doesn't matter. We'll just play easy games and that'll boost our record, whatever. Okay, but people aren't going to watch. And by the way, media rights and that money coming from there, they want to see that. Remember that Las Vegas game? Remember that LSU USC game? Hey, that's a difficult game. But what about the ratings? What about the money you got from it? So it's really coming down to business decisions and what that's going to look like moving forward. I'm just very interested. I think the biggest issue with the college football system is that there is not a level playing field in all sorts, shapes, and sizes, right? We're talking about collectives. We're talking about donors. We're talking about recruiting. And now we're talking about the strength of schedule. All of these things, all these arguments lead to the Super League. That is the only solution to level things out for everybody. Until then, we're just going to continue having these little arguments and discourses. And that's just the nature of the game.
Agreed. I'm excited to see how these playoff games roll out. I'm hoping that there are some great games and you see the parity in those games against different conference matchups. I'm interested to see who makes it and continues to advance, and specifically what conference they are a part of. I think it'll be interesting to see some Big 12 ACC upsets to Big 10 SEC schools. If not, I think the Big 10 SEC bias will be as strong as ever if it doesn't happen. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, the worst case scenario is the last teams remaining being from Big Ten and SEC, which is something we saw with women's soccer, right? All 4 finalists were ACC. Like that's the truth. The bias will be stronger than ever, and that's just how it goes. But only time will tell. I think that is it for this episode. Another great episode in the books. To everybody that watched on YouTube or listened on Spotify, thank you guys so much. Really, if you're listening up until this point, it would mean the world if you subscribe on YouTube. Even if you're a follower on Spotify, please go to YouTube, subscribe. It truly does make a difference. We're close to getting to 100, so that would really be helpful. And share this episode with anybody that you think would be interested. It really, really does mean a lot. So thank you guys. We really appreciate it. And per usual, we'll see you all next Monday.
Bye.